It was midday in Texas, and the pavement looked as if it were throwing fire back at the sun. Heat shimmered off the road, turning the air into a wavering veil, sticking to my skin like 1,000 needles. I was driving my old Ford back to the garage after a long morning of repairs, thinking about the cold glass of water waiting in my kitchen. Then, suddenly, the brakes screamed. The seatbelt snapped tight across my chest. Right there at the edge of the highway, I saw it. A shallow ditch, cracked and littered with trash, and in it, something most folks would pass by, mistaking it for a torn plastic bag. But my eyes caught the truth. A Doberman mother, so thin her skeleton pressed against her skin like a shadow of itself. 3 tiny lives clung to her belly, searching for milk where there was none left. A rasping breath drifted up, rough as an engine about to die. The smell of damp earth and rusty metal hit my nose, sharp enough to sting. She didn't move. But one detail froze me in place. Her front legs still stretched out, trembling, weak but deliberate, like a last sheltering wing for the 3 little ones. My heart began to pound. It felt like someone had a hand around my throat, my chest heavy as lead. I thought, how many cars have already passed? How many eyes have seen and kept going? The roar behind me snapped me back. A truck barreled by, its horn tearing through the air. I leapt to the shoulder, sand and grit stinging my arms. 1 second slower, and I might have been swept under. When the dust settled, I looked back at the ditch. 4 pairs of eyes. 1 clouded, 3 misted with tears. Small, weak, but still holding on. I don't know why, but in that instant, I heard it, like a whisper inside my head. Don't walk away. Please don't. I stood frozen for a few seconds, something pressing hard against my ribs. I knew if I turned my back, they would die here, silently, remembered by no one. And I would carry that guilt for the rest of my life. I climbed down into the ditch. Cold mud seeped into my shoes. I bent low and touched that frail body. Her skin was burning hot, yet her whole frame trembled. She didn't growl. She didn't bite. She just pressed her nose softly into my hand. Those eyes. They weren't an animal's eyes anymore. They were a mother's eyes at the end of her road. A small sob escaped me. Lord, who did this to you? I knelt there, the smell of damp filth and dried blood thick in my throat. The little ones curled tight, one turning pale, its body almost still. I held my finger to its nose. No breath. Its chest felt frozen. My hand shook. Then, a faint twitch. My heart leapt. It jerked again, weak but real, like a spark fighting to glow in the dark. I could hear my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. Sweat ran down my face, stinging my lips. Don't you give up, little one. Don't you dare quit on me. Not yet. The wind whipped across the road, grit striking my face like needles. Cars kept flying by. No one stopped. I cradled the Doberman mother, feeling her bones rattle beneath my palm, light as a handful of ash. And yet in those clouded eyes I saw it, a flicker of light, faint but enough to hold me there, enough to tell me if I walked away now the story would end here. And I couldn't let it. I pressed my forehead against hers and whispered under the roar of the highway, if you're still breathing, I'm not leaving. I promise. A whimper rose from one of the pups, trembling, fragile. It cut straight through me like a blade. I knew then I had only one choice. I had to get them out. Right now. I ran back to my truck, my heart still clenched. That image stayed with me, the eyes in the ditch. It wasn't just a dog anymore. It was a mother who had fought, who had waited for someone willing to stop. And that day, that someone was me. My name is Frank Miller. I'm 54 years old, just a small-town mechanic in Texas. My life has always circled around the smell of motor oil, the clang of metal, and the cold, white glare of the bulbs hanging in my garage. Folks around here know me as Old Frank, the quiet one, the man who keeps his head down. But no one sees the empty spaces I've carried for years. My house sits 2 blocks off the highway, a worn-down wooden place I've patched up myself, hinge by hinge, door by door. Out front stands an old oak tree. In summer, its leaves scatter across the walkway, and I sit under its shade in the late afternoons, sipping cold coffee and thinking, there's no one left to wait for. My wife left years ago, taking nothing but a single photograph of us when we were young. We never had children. Every night when I come home, the living room feels as silent as a meat locker. I turn on my old radio, and the country music crackles like a long sigh just to cover up the emptiness. Around town, folks are used to seeing me with oil-blackened hands, a stained blue shirt, and shoulders bent as I change someone's tire by the roadside. I'm not a rich man. I juggle the water bill, the electric bill, just like anyone. But I've never ignored a call in the middle of the night. I know what it feels like when your car dies out there on the road, how that helplessness cuts into you like a blade. Maybe that's why, when I saw that Doberman mother lying in the ditch that day, my heart moved before my head could. I didn't weigh the costs. I didn't hesitate. I just knew. If I didn't stop, nobody would. When I held her in my arms, she felt weightless, her bones clicking like dry twigs. Her hot, ragged breath burned against my wrist, every gasp a plea. My hands shook, slick with sweat and road dust. The 3 pups trembled, their fur wet and matted, each tiny whimper slicing into me like a knife. I looked up at the empty road. The sun poured down, searing the back of my shirt. Cars roared past, leaving red dust choking my throat. A few people turned their heads, eyes flicking over like a camera shutter, and then they were gone. Not one stopped. I felt anger, but more than that, I felt angry at myself. If I walked away like them, I'd spent my life hiding in the shadow of my garage, dodging old losses. But right then, when that Doberman's clouded eyes met mine, all my silence cracked wide open. I whispered, "Don't give up, Grace. I'm going to call you that." Grace, because making it this far is a grace in itself. I hadn't planned on naming her, but the moment the name left my lips, my chest loosened a little, like finding a drop of water in the middle of a burning desert. I remember my hands, calloused, scarred with grease, touching that torn flesh. I'd never thought a poor mechanic like me could hold a life in his hands, and never had I felt so needed. Old memories came rushing back. My mother lying in a county hospital bed, breathing weakly through an oxygen tube, no one at her side. I'd arrived an hour too late. By the time I walked into the room, her eyes were closed. That regret has followed me every night since. And now, looking at Grace lying motionless, it felt as though my mother's voice was whispering, "Don't be late again." I drew a deep breath, heat burning my chest. I knew I couldn't turn back. Money or no money, plan or no plan, I was getting Grace and those 3 pups out of that death-trap ditch. I gathered her up, dust clinging to my clothes. My old Ford rattled to life, engine trembling. I set the cardboard box with the 3 pups on the passenger seat, wrapped Grace in my work shirt. Behind the wheel, sweat streamed down my face, my heart pounding like a hammer. In the rearview mirror, the road stretched out endlessly behind me, and I knew nothing in my life would ever be the same again. My name is Frank Miller. I'm 54 years old, just a small-town mechanic in Texas. My life has always circled around the smell of motor oil, the clang of metal, and the cold, white glare of the bulbs hanging in my garage. Folks around here know me as Old Frank, the quiet one, the man who keeps his head down. But no one sees the empty spaces I've carried for years. My house sits 2 blocks off the highway, a worn-down wooden place I've patched up myself, hinge by hinge, door by door. Out front stands an old oak tree. In summer, its leaves scatter across the walkway, and I sit under its shade in the late afternoons, sipping cold coffee and thinking, there's no one left to wait for. My wife left years ago, taking nothing but a single photograph of us when we were young. We never had children. Every night when I come home, the living room feels as silent as a meat locker. I turn on my old radio, and the country music crackles like a long sigh just to cover up the emptiness. Around town, folks are used to seeing me with oil-blackened hands, a stained blue shirt, and shoulders bent as I change someone's tire by the roadside. I'm not a rich man. I juggle the water bill, the electric bill, just like anyone. But I've never ignored a call in the middle of the night. I know what it feels like when your car dies out there on the road, how that helplessness cuts into you like a blade. Maybe that's why, when I saw that Doberman mother lying in the ditch that day, my heart moved before my head could. I didn't weigh the costs. I didn't hesitate. I just knew. If I didn't stop, nobody would. When I held her in my arms, she felt weightless, her bones clicking like dry twigs. Her hot, ragged breath burned against my wrist, every gasp a plea. My hands shook, slick with sweat and road dust. The 3 pups trembled, their fur wet and matted, each tiny whimper slicing into me like a knife. I looked up at the empty road. The sun poured down, searing the back of my shirt. Cars roared past, leaving red dust choking my throat. A few people turned their heads, eyes flicking over like a camera shutter, and then they were gone. Not one stopped. I felt anger, but more than that, I felt angry at myself. If I walked away like them, I'd spent my life hiding in the shadow of my garage, dodging old losses. But right then, when that Doberman's clouded eyes met mine, all my silence cracked wide open. I whispered, "Don't give up, Grace. I'm going to call you that." Grace, because making it this far is a grace in itself. I hadn't planned on naming her, but the moment the name left my lips, my chest loosened a little, like finding a drop of water in the middle of a burning desert. I remember my hands, calloused, scarred with grease, touching that torn flesh. I'd never thought a poor mechanic like me could hold a life in his hands, and never had I felt so needed. Old memories came rushing back. My mother lying in a county hospital bed, breathing weakly through an oxygen tube, no one at her side. I'd arrived an hour too late. By the time I walked into the room, her eyes were closed. That regret has followed me every night since. And now, looking at Grace lying motionless, it felt as though my mother's voice was whispering, "Don't be late again." I drew a deep breath, heat burning my chest. I knew I couldn't turn back. Money or no money, plan or no plan, I was getting Grace and those 3 pups out of that death-trap ditch. I gathered her up, dust clinging to my clothes. My old Ford rattled to life, engine trembling. I set the cardboard box with the 3 pups on the passenger seat, wrapped Grace in my work shirt. Behind the wheel, sweat streamed down my face, my heart pounding like a hammer. In the rearview mirror, the road stretched out endlessly behind me, and I knew nothing in my life would ever be the same again. The door flew open, spilling a harsh wash of white neon light. A woman in a lab coat ran toward me, her hair tied back high, her breath short. She looked to be in her 40s, eyes wide, part panic, part resolve. I shoved Grace into her arms, my voice breaking. Please, she's barely breathing." She nodded hard without a single question, shouting over her shoulder, "Get me a stretcher, now!" 2 more staff members rushed out, wheeling a gurney. Grace was lying on it, the 3 pups still huddled in the cardboard box. I followed them inside, my heart racing, every step heavy as lead. Inside, the smell of disinfectant burned my nose. Fluorescent lights glared down, bright enough to sting. I stood swaying in a corner, watching their hands fly, needles, oxygen tubing, monitors clipped to that starved body. The screen beeped in scattered, dragging tones, like a warning of the end. One of the pups squeaked, its chest tightening. I rushed to the box, lifting it out. It was so small it fit entirely between my palms. No breath. I turned to the vet. "Help her too, please." She glanced at me, her eyes flickering with a trace of sorrow. "She's gone." It felt like someone punched me straight in the chest, but the very next second, that tiny body jerked. I shouted, "She's not gone!" Not yet. I laid her on the cold metal table, my 2 hands pressing the tiny chest. 1, 2, 3. Memory after memory of my mother, every regret, crashing back. I wouldn't let history repeat itself. Then, a faint breath, a soft gasp. Her eyes cracked open. I broke down, falling to my knees, tears soaking through my oil-stained shirt. The vet looked at me and whispered, "You just pulled her back." But before I could breathe, a long, flat beep screamed from Grace's monitor. The heart line flickered. My vision blurred, my legs unsteady. I heard the vet call out, "She's in collapse! We're losing her!" I lunged to the table, gripping her trembling paw. "Grace, don't you leave me now! Don't you dare!" The lights flickered. Staff pushed in another IV line. Cold air from the vent swept the back of my neck, making me shiver. I pressed my warm palm to her forehead and whispered through the storm of machines, "If you can breathe one more time, I'll carry the rest." The vet turned to me. "We need oxygen, fluids, fast. But it might not be enough. Do you understand?" I nodded, tasting blood from biting my lip. "Do whatever it takes." The monitor beeped again, a weak heartbeat. I saw Grace's eyelids tremble, her paw twitch. But then her body slackened. The air in the room thickened. I held my breath, my throat locked. "Start compressions," the vet yelled. They pressed down on her chest. I stood frozen, fists clenched so hard my nails drew blood. I didn't dare blink. 1 second stretched into a century. The machine chirped once, then twice. The heart line blinked back. I exhaled hard, my knees giving way on the cold tile. "Still with us," the vet panted. But it wasn't over. She turned to me, her voice firm and clear. "She's in metabolic collapse. If we don't act fast, she won't make it. We need to consider a direct transfusion. It's risky and expensive. High chance of failure." I stood stunned, my heart climbing into my throat. I had no money, no insurance. But before me lay a mother who had fought to the end and 3 pups crying for her. I had no choice. I stepped forward, my voice hoarse but firm. "Do it. Whatever it takes. If she needs blood, take mine." The room went still for a beat, only the hiss of the oxygen, the weak cries of the pups. I saw the vet's eyes flicker. Then she nodded. "All right." Prep the procedure. I dropped into a metal chair, my hands covering my face. My breath came fast, my chest about to burst. But in the chaos, one truth burned clear. I'd crossed the point of no return. If Grace fell, I would fall with her. Night fell hard. Rain pattered on the tin roof of the clinic, each drop a cold hammer against the silence. Inside, the dim yellow light threw Grace's shadow across the white wall. She lay still on the metal table, her frail body tangled in wires and tubes. The monitor beeped in scattered beats, each one striking my chest like a hammer blow. Dr. Karen turned to me, her voice low and urgent. "Her body is shutting down. We'll try the transfusion now." I nodded, my hand trembling as I rolled up my sleeve. The staff readied the needle. My skin burned tight, sweat soaking my shirt. I looked over at Grace. Her eyes clouded, yet in them a flicker still burned. "Hang on, Mama." "Just one more breath," I whispered. The needle pierced my vein. Pain shot up my arm. I clenched my teeth as the metallic tang of blood filled my nose. Dark red drops slid through the line from me into her. A strange bond, like I was giving her the last breath from my own lungs. The doctor called out the numbers. 60, 58, 55. My throat went dry. "Come on, Grace. Don't let go." In that moment, memories crashed over me. My mother, lying in a county hospital bed, her breath shallow under an oxygen mask. I'd come too late. Her hand was already cold. That regret had cut into me for 20 years. And now, before me, another mother, alone, teetering on the edge. I swore I would not fail again. The monitor screamed, a long, flat tone. The room froze. I jumped to my feet, shouting, "No! Not again! Don't you leave me, Grace!" The doctor pressed on her chest. I cried out, tears streaming down my face. "Breathe!" "Just one more breath, girl. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for them. They still need you." From the cardboard box, 3 weak cries answered. One pup stumbled, calling out like a desperate plea. That sound tore the room apart, ripped straight through my heart. My hand shook as I pressed it to Grace's forehead. I shut my eyes, whispering through my ragged breath, "Take it all. Take whatever's left of me. Just don't quit now." Silence. The rain hammered harder outside, a drumbeat on the roof. Then, a signal. One beat. Faint, but there. The monitor chirped, a short beep, green light blinking. I broke down, collapsing against the table, my hand gripping her paw tight. "She's fighting back," the doctor whispered. But the battle wasn't over. Her heartbeat staggered, fast, then slow. Her breath rattled, chest rising and falling in a brutal struggle. The whole room held its breath with each number. I never let go of her paw, terrified that if I did, she would slip away. I bent close to her ear, my voice broken. "Grace, if you can hear me, stay. Just stay. You don't know me, but I need you to stay." And in the dark, a small miracle. Her clouded eyes flickered. Not clear, not strong, but enough. She heard me. A tear spilled from my own eye, falling onto her muzzle. "This time," I whispered. "I'm not too late." Time crawled. I sat on the cold chair, arm throbbing from the transfusion, head heavy against the table's edge. The staff rotated shifts, watching every line. The clock struck 2 a.m. I had never known a night so long. Then suddenly, the monitor's rhythm steadied. Beep, beep, beep. The heartbeat evened out. The screen glowed like a lamp in the darkness. I lifted my head, sweat and tears running together. My heart rose out of the pit. Dr. Karen exhaled in relief. "She's stabilizing." Still critical, but she's holding. I slumped back, my whole body trembling. My hand still clasped her paw, this time not stiff with fear, but gentle, like holding a miracle. Outside, the rain had stopped. A rare stillness filled the room. I sat there, drained, but inside my chest, for the first time in years, something warm was alive again. Faith. Outside, the world was beginning to pale. Night retreated slowly, giving way to the gray haze of dawn. I was still sitting there, my arm numb after the transfusion, my back pressed against the cold wall. My eyes burned red, not just from staying awake all night, but from tears that had run dry. Grace lay motionless on the table, her frail body covered in wires and bandages. The pups slept curled in their cardboard box, wrapped in a thin blanket. Their faint, uneven breaths whispered like a prayer. I let my head sink for a moment, eyes closed, until the smallest sound touched my ear. Not the machines, not the hushed voices of staff. It was a fragile noise, like a breath fighting for one more beat. My head snapped up. On the table, Grace's chest lifted. Slow, strained, but real. I leapt to my feet, stepping close, clutching her paw. It trembled weakly in my hand. "Grace, can you hear me?" I whispered. Her heavy eyelids fluttered, then cracked open. A thin line of light revealed clouded pupils, but alive. She looked straight at me, not with the despair I had seen before. This time it was the gaze of someone returned from the brink. My heart jumped to my throat. My voice shook as I stammered, "You're back! Oh God, you're back!" Dr. Karen stood behind me, her hand pressed over her mouth. A young tech dropped his pen and broke into tears. The room fell silent, except for the steady beeping of the monitor, more even, more sure than ever before. Grace blinked again, then turned her head. A rustle rose. The pups were awake, crying out softly. One stumbled from the blanket, heading toward the table. As if hearing them, Grace tensed, lifted her head higher, her ears quivering. I bent down quickly, lifting each pup to lie beside her. Her body shook, exhausted, but she stretched her paw around them, just as she had in that ditch when I first found her. One pup latched onto her side, searching for milk that wasn't there, clinging anyway. And Grace, with the last of her strength, bent her head to lick its back. I broke. Tears streamed down, unstoppable. I turned my face away, but the sobs rattled in my chest. The whole room seemed to choke with me. Dr. Karen wiped her eyes, whispering, "I don't know how, but she's here." I leaned close to Grace's ear, trembling. "You did it, Mama." You stayed. A new morning spilled through the windows, pale gold light striking the steel table, catching in Grace's eyes. They glowed brighter than I had ever seen them. Not just life flickering back, but a will that refused to die. I sat down again, still holding her paw. The ache in my arm was gone. The cold from the tile beneath me is forgotten. What I felt instead was warmth, seeping from her fragile body into my hand, the warmth of a soul that had fought and won. "Stay with me, Grace," I whispered again, not as a command this time, but as thanks. From the box, the pups cried louder, their voices rising like a stumbling but hopeful hymn. One lifted its head, clear eyes shining at me before turning back to its mother. That small cry filled the room, declaring, "We are still here. We are still alive." I turned to Dr. Karen. She nodded softly, a trembling smile on her weary face. "She's not out of danger yet. But she's stronger than I thought, stronger than any of us thought." I swallowed hard, my chest opening in a way it hadn't for years. After a lifetime of loneliness, I knew this moment had changed me. I was no longer just an old mechanic worn thin by life. I had just witnessed the impossible. Morning light poured across the glass, stretching a golden line across the table, and in it, I saw our shadows, mine, Grace's, and the three little ones, overlapping into one. A portrait of fate. And I knew, from this day forward, Life had turned a new page. In the days that followed, that little clinic turned into a shelter of small miracles. Grace was still weak, but bit by bit she found her breath again, her rhythm of life again. Every morning when I walked in, my chest tightened at the sight of her lifting her head, her eyes clearer, her ears twitching when her pups cried. Those 3 little ones, who had first trembled in a heap, began to crawl, to play. They touched their mother as if afraid to lose her, yet that clinging woke something fierce and tender inside Grace. I saw it. Even while still hooked to IV lines, she would try to lick the last bits of dirt off their backs, as if to say, "Mama's still here." A week passed, and the video of Grace's rescue spread across social media. Strangers sent prayers, food, even handwritten letters shaky with emotion. Thank you for stopping. Thank you, Grace, for living with that money. I built a small pen beside my garage. Wooden roof, low fence around a patch of grass. On a rough plank over the gate, I painted in my clumsy but steady hand, Grace's Refuge, where no mother dies unseen. The first day I brought Grace and her pups there, the sky was a deep, endless blue, the wind smelling of fresh-cut grass. She walked slowly through the gate, her 3 babies trotting after. I watched them, my heart filling with something a lifetime of lonely mechanic's work had never given me: pride. The story kept traveling. One day, a silver-haired woman, 67 years old, came all the way out to see us. Her hands shook as she held a faded photo of a Doberman pup taken years ago. When she saw Grace, she burst into tears. "Oh my God, I raised her when she was a puppy." I thought she'd been lost in that storm. Grace stepped closer, not shrinking away, and rested her head in the woman's lap. Forgiveness, simple and silent. I stood by, tears streaming again. Not from sorrow, but because I could see it. Love, even forgotten, can still find its way home. A year later, Grace passed on. One soft spring afternoon, sunlight lay gold across the yard. She rested under the oak beside the refuge, eyes closed in peace, her 3 grown pups lying around her. I buried her at the base of that tree, planting sunflowers all around. On a small wooden marker I carved, "Here rest the eyes that taught us to stop, to care, to love." Now the refuge shelters dozens more abandoned souls. But each morning when I hear the puppies playing outside, I still see Grace's eyes somewhere among them, a reminder that sometimes stopping once can change someone's whole world. And I know I was saved too. If you've stayed with me to this moment, I'm truly grateful. The story of Vera and her 3 pups wasn't just one rainy night. It was a reminder that life, no matter how fragile, is worth bending down for, worth holding tight with everything in you. I cried writing this, and maybe you've cried reading it. But these aren't wasted tears. They're the tears of compassion, the belief that miracles appear only when we refuse to give up. Thank you for listening, for staying with me through each breath of those small lives. If this story has touched you, leave me a sign, a comment, a subscription, or even just a silent nod behind your screen. It's how you and I keep the fire burning for other fragile souls out there. And I want to ask you sincerely, have you ever saved a small life? Maybe a dog, a cat, or someone trembling before you. If you have, please tell me. I want to hear it. We, everyone with a heart, need to hear it. Thank you for staying, for believing, and for never turning away from life.